My name is Iris Ng. I've been a cinematographer since 2008. I think there's a lot of moments along the way that inspire someone to take their path, but I was inspired when I was young, watching films with my mom and grandmother. They were like Hollywood classics, and just having a connection to cinema from an early age, just through those films was really impactful. And I also had avid photographer hobbyists in my family, like my grandfather, my uncle, and my dad. They all were image takers, and having a record of my family through them and through their work was really meaningful. And I also have an emotional connection with photographic images as a result of that. And I think combining those two influences helped me to see cinematography as a craft. In particular, when I saw the films of James Wong Howe, I felt like there was something that was elevated and really psychological about his films, and so something that stood out to me, that spoke to something else about the storytelling. And it really appealed to me to maybe one day be shaping that experience in that way. I went to film school. I took a lot of photography classes in high school as well, but I went to film school with the idea that I wanted to be a cinematographer. And I didn't get as much practice as I wanted to when I was there, but I learned a lot of the other aspects of the craft, which was helpful in retrospect. And from then I went to work at Claremont Camera for 5.5 years, I think, and just got to know a lot of ACs and people in industry who came in and out, and learned about business and learned about high-end cameras too, which is something you don't get to do in film school. And just from that, I wanted to shoot on the side and try to build a reel in the way that people tell you to. Found that really challenging, but one day a lot of things happen along the way, but I think Luc Montpellier, who was somebody I knew at the time and sort of a mentor, and who let me assist for him on really indie projects, said if you just want to shoot, you have to do it to shoot. Like the ACing is good. I didn't think that I could really learn from watching somebody as much as I could learn from having my own problems to solve. So that his comment resonated with me, and I sort of tried to just focus as much as I could. And one day, a documentary producer approached me to film this little demo. And since then, I've just been working in documentaries, and I've really loved it. And I've really found that it suited me. I mean, sensibility sort of means sensitivity too, right? So I think I do bring sensitivity to the table, and the ability to read people, and the ability to create a safe space for the director and I to really work, isolated from all the other elements that could be interfering with being honest about a process, and being honest about what's really working and what it isn't, and what the insecurities are about a project, and what the strengths are about a given way of working. And I think that helps to just, get at things honestly, as opposed to through preconceptions or preconceived notions of how something should happen. And especially in my work, that's really helped. I think being a good cinematographer means being a good listener. And I think sometimes in my work, it's the job of the sound person to be a good watcher and to look out for me and to look out for everything that's going on, and to keep us safe and aware of everything, because I have my eye on the eyepiece. And I think my job is to listen to the director, the people in front of the camera, everything around me that's going on, in order to capture something honestly. I think my role is to harness all the experience that I've had up until that point, all the knowledge I've accumulated, but also to be open to something that's actually going on at the moment. I think balancing those two elements, balancing that from the past and the present of what the director wants and what the people in front of the camera are telling me through body language or whatnot, through the situation and location, what is actually going on is something that has to be processed into a moment that can be filmed. I struggle with time, I think, more than anything. I suppose there are technical things that I come across that are challenges for me, but overall, doing this, I feel like I struggle with time all the time and balancing who I want to be as a cinematographer, how much focus I can give to each project and not just prioritize one over the other, but really be immersed in each one that I'm involved with, while also having time to be involved with the people in my life and have time for myself as well. I think there are a lot of obstacles, but also a lot of advantages to being a female cinematographer. I think one of the things that I can point to is, or that I can maybe talk about, is maybe a lack of role models, because I feel like I've been lucky to have come across one at the right time for me in my career. And I was working at Claremont and I was trying to figure out how, after 5 years or so, how to take the plunge and to address all the goals that I had in life, which included being a cinematographer, which included personal goals as well in relation to my age. And I came across Zoe Durst's article. She was on the cover of the CSC magazine in 2005. And there's sort of a retrospect of her work. And she got to talk about her path. And there was one section in particular where she mentioned how she had a goal to be a DOP at the age of 30. And that wasn't happening. She cited her own personal problem of being an AC and how that would likely take 10 years. It would likely take 10 years before she could get her eye behind the camera. So I think it meant that she just had to take the plunge. And to me, that meant that I just had to take the plunge as well. And it's never going to feel like the right time, and you are going to be impatient, but there are goals in your life that you have to fulfill, and the only way to do that is to take control over it. And that's not that easy to do, but just the fact that I could see myself in somebody who was successful and did what I wanted to do and had this career that sounded like one that I wanted to have was really powerful to me. I'm not sure about the advice that I could have been given, because I feel like advice is always based on the person giving it and based on their path. And you can take it, you can listen to it, but I think you always have to take it into account where it's coming from. And I don't think there's any one piece of advice that would have helped me in my path. I think just having people around me and seeing how they work is really helpful. And sometimes seeing how you don't want to be is also really helpful. I think being a good listener helps me to be a good cinematographer. I'm not sure. I think there are a lot of traits that make different people good cinematographers in their own right. But for the work I do, I find that really listening to a director and to the situation and what it's telling me, and not imparting my own opinion on it and just expanding on what I'm receiving. I think another character trait that makes me a good cinematographer is the ability to adapt to a situation and to go with the flow of something that is continually changing. I think if we think that ideas or any notions are fixed, then we're trapped into sort of painting by numbers. And I think being able to read a situation and to let it evolve is something that's really helped me along the way. One of the biggest lessons that I've learned is to not take any of the process for granted. So you can't assume that any part of it is going to get done the way that you think it should, or that you think it will, or that anybody assures you that it will. I think that you have to keep your eye on the things that are within your control the whole time that you can. And that involves testing and also that you can't rely on language to communicate. I think when you're trying to convey ideas, it's about really showing a director or showing people what that means. And otherwise you become sort of a button pusher. And I think you become somebody who makes assumptions about I think it means that you're creating something for yourself as opposed to something that's a collaboration or that's based on what you're really hearing from a director. But overall, I think the biggest lesson that I've learned is one that I learned when I was 9. And it came from my first art teacher, who, when she was teaching us to draw, told us to look very intently at the object or the person that we were drawing and to not look down at the page. And she said, draw what you see, not what you think you see. And I've only realized recently how useful that is. It just means you can't bring your own preconceptions to something because you won't be as observant about it as if you just kept looking at it very carefully. and looked for what it was giving you as opposed to what you think it is. I've realized that this job is really, that it's just really about relationships, both on the camera, behind the camera, and in your life. I think it's hard to pin down the absolute highlight of my career because I think recognition is always nice, and there are moments where I've worked on a film that has gained a lot of recognition, and that's a true honor to be taken seriously as a cinematographer and to be able to talk about my work, especially in settings where I'm giving a master class, or even in this situation where all of us are getting this platform to talk about what we do. I think that's quite a highlight to be at this point. I feel like it is really about the relationships that we form along the way that are the most valuable and the biggest highlight in it. It's not about one moment, but it's about an accumulation of moments. I feel that the industry has changed in the way that we are affected by social media. I think it has affected the way we shoot films, the way we fund them, the way we distribute them. It's made the process of filmmaking a very subconscious one, I think, but it's also allowed a broader audience in a way, and it's also allowed a conversation to continue from a film. I would love to see us detach ourselves from an exploitative or objectifying gaze. And I just don't believe that anybody should be oppressed by the frame, and I would love for the industry to be more inclusive in the way that we talk about technology, create technology for different body types, advertise it, and create language around technology as well. I would just love to do something completely stylized and just a complete departure from what I normally do, and I can't name, I don't know what that is. I feel that there are heroes that I would have fantasies about working with, like my favorite author, Haruki Murakami, but that would be impossible because there's a language barrier, and I think that just doesn't happen. I just want to work with people who work with my personality, who we can learn from and have space to explore something with. And I think if I were to think of established directors or anybody like that, it would be somebody who would already have a voice, and I like developing a voice with somebody. I think advice that I would give to anybody who wants to do this is that your path is your own, and you have to really listen to yourself. And you might get a lot of advice along the way, and you have to take into account that that advice comes from the person who is giving it, and it's completely based on their experiences. So if you're to be able to sift through all of that and negotiate how that all applies to you, you really have to listen to your own voice and your own instincts, and know that that is the only way that you can really approach anything that comes at you. I think the impact that we have in shaping how people see people and the way that they can be othered is really impactful, the way that we represent people in film and in media. And I think there's a huge responsibility to not further damages that have already been done.